Hi, I'm Brenna Snyderman, and I am here with Brian Campbell and Lynn Sterrett, who are two of our pioneers driving the future of industry at Deloitte. We're here at CES, and we're very excited to be here. So I'll just start with a quick question for both of you. What have you seen so far that you think is pretty noteworthy?
Well, thanks, Brenna. I mean, it's amazing to be here at CES. One of the things that I've been kind of most enthralled with is agriculture seems to have been a huge kind of new area that I hadn't seen at CES in the past. And there's a company that's actually reionizing and rehydrating desert soil to be able to use for farmland. And when you think about the implications of that, they're almost limitless. So pretty cool stuff.
It's great.
And I love being right by the auto section. My son was like, you definitely have to go check out all the new things in automotive. And so I'm excited we're here right above automotive. But I also have to say my most impressive thing so far for me goes back to like my roots of healthcare. And there is now a bra that helps detect breast cancer. And knowing that 1 out of 8 women will have breast cancer in their lifetime, the ability to get earlier treatment will mean better outcomes.
That's great. Those are both great. And I think for me, one of the most interesting and exciting things I've seen is just how pervasive AI has been throughout the entire event space so far. And I think it's important to note that we have all worked closely together, and I lead our state of generative AI in the enterprise research that Deloitte does. And so I wanted to talk to you both a little bit about what we're seeing with generative AI in the space today. Our research, for example, showed that while most industries care about sort of the same things, whether it's, data quality or data protection, each industry really tends to focus on some very different things and have different levels of confidence in what they're doing. So for example, the technology industry leaders there were much more confident in how expert they are in generative AI. And life sciences and healthcare leaders report that they are doing a lot more to measure the ROI of their investments. So Lynn, do you have any thoughts on that and how industries are thinking about generative AI in different ways?
Yeah, well, it's fascinating because everyone is progressing at different paces and different speeds. But definitely everybody had the huge hype. I mean, like all the new technology. Brian is one of our tech partners, knows like the tech hype. Everybody had it, and everyone had the tech bug last year, and they did a lot of experiments, a lot of proofs of concept. So I'm excited about what each of the sectors are going to do to really solve their heart of the business issues. And we really think about that in the way that we go to market through industry and understanding the depth of workflows, the depth of the value creation, and then being able to marry that with the issues that they're trying to solve is going to, I think, accelerate some of those sectors that may not be as advanced out of the experimentation stage. And so I'm super excited about that. I also think that as we think about where we're at with industry advantage and the ability to have an advantage of the workflow and the most specific issues for that particular sector, Gen AI, the value, we can't even fathom what the potential value is. I mean, we are at the inch level right now with the basics of efficiency, productivity. When we start thinking about value creation, new products that'll be explored on the floor, new ways that we can actually interact with data, that's the part that I think is going to accelerate different sectors to like really having it be in the heart of their core of their business.
Yeah. That's great. And Brian, I think to follow on to that, one of the things our research has shown is, although there's so many applications, as Lynn said, to generative AI, and there's so many different ways it's been used, about 70% of our leaders say they're really only scaling, less than 30% of the pilots they're trying out. So can you talk a little bit about what you're seeing in terms of what organizations need to do to be able to scale their generative AI pilots?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Lynn talked a little bit about the hype cycle, and I think every enterprise out there wanted to be a part of that hype cycle, right? So you saw a lot of experimentation at all edges of the enterprise, not always so much associated with the business strategy or the ultimate outcomes that those companies were trying to drive towards, or even where they could differentiate, but more just to be able to try the technology out, to be able to see what they can do. Mm-hmm. And what we found is there's been this significant pivot, especially this year, over to what are the most meaningful business outcomes that we can drive towards. How can we tie this technology to the core of our strategy and the places that we want to differentiate in the market with our customers or with our operations or whatever the case may be, to Lynn's point, at the heart of the business. So that's been a big pivot that's sort of given you the sort of areas of the POC that have moved to production in a little bit more choice that a lot of our enterprises have sort of seen. The second part, though, is a real focus on business value and sort of the business case behind the technology. So it can be expensive, especially when used without sort of a very, very clear thought in terms of the outcome that you're trying to drive and the cost to be able to get there. So it's been amazing to be here at CES, because if last year was a little bit more AI for AI's sake, this year seems to be AI for industry and AI for outcome's sake. And you see that in automotive, you see it in healthcare and life sciences, financial services seems to be very much at the forefront here. And every booth that you walked out to talks about the outcomes, talks about whether it's growth, a different level of customer experience, the level of cost savings. That seems to have been a real step change in the last 12 to 18 months that a lot of enterprises that have gone on. And then the third is actually just the evolution of the ecosystem. So you think about, the moment 2 years ago when everybody had these chatbots at their fingertips, everybody had to build it for themselves because it was really just the technology that was available. But as that's evolved, ISVs, tech players, some of the even GSIs and others of the world have developed a huge degree of solutions that really focus on some of those end problems that you're able to pull together and sort of piece together in a little bit more of a modular way to get you a 60-70% starting point versus starting from zero. So in doing that, you've sort of let some of the POCs sort of, stay back there, but focused on the ones that are really going to have the most impact. And in certain cases, thinking about bringing those in from the outside as well.
Yeah.
And I think we have to think about that impact, who's the buyer of that, right? It's not just IT. I think we think about AI as being an IT only play. It's really not. It's around core business value, right? Yeah. CFOs, CEOs. And so I'm excited that there's the ROI that you talked about is actually being asked for by all the executive leaders, not just being asked for by the IT leadership.
Yeah, if we had conversations with CIOs and CTOs and CDOs for that first 12 months, I'd say at least half, if not more, with GMs of companies, businesses, sort of different product lines now looking to use it at the heart of their business now that they've sort of hurdled some of those products.
Yeah.
That's a really great point, and I think that speaks to some of the pragmatism we're now starting to see, where it's less of the gee whiz and more of the, okay, how are we actually going to use this? And I'm really glad, Brian, that you started to talk about specific industries, because one of the things that we're seeing in our research is where organizations are getting the most value from a proof of concept or from something that they're scaling is if it's a use case that is very industry specific. So they're not just generally using generative AI, they're using it for something that makes the most sense for their industry. So for example, in consumer, using chatbots to help drive customer interaction, or in finance, using tools to help with compliance and data privacy. Can you talk a little bit about some of the use cases that you've seen be the most successful depending on the industry that they're in?
Yeah, do you want to start, Liz?
Yeah, well, I mean, industry really matters when it comes to Gen AI. To really see the power of Gen AI, industry understanding and depth is going to be super critical. But I got to back up a little bit first, because I think we've been in this ERP mode, right, for back office centric mode for several years. Some could say a decade. And each of the industries and sectors are going at it at its own pace. But what I love about it is we're now going to flip from a back office mentality and the core capabilities we need of being in the cloud, having the data modernized, having it prepared is for me, the stepping stones of the value of generative AI. So we're going to get that all in place. Now we can go solve the most complex issues that we have out there. So if you think about the consumer experience you talked about, Brenna, every consumer wants to be able to have a different personalized experience, whether it's personal shopping, whether it's retail, and all the convergence we're seeing between the sectors and the ability to create new value with that convergence. If I think about, you can't be in healthcare without thinking about how am I going to solve readmissions? How am I going to solve the readmission rate? And that Gen AI can give us very different answers now. Life sciences, how am I going to get drugs discovered at a much faster pace? As we all see right now with the GLP-1s, those that are in that race are winning from a market share perspective. So the rest are trying to catch up with a variation of that particular drug entity. So if you think about all of these things collectively, it goes back to part of the business issues Gen AI is going to solve much quicker than it ever did. And new value, new products are going to be created based on it.
Yeah, it's interesting because some industries are moving a little bit faster than others. I mean, Lynn, you mentioned healthcare life sciences, which has been a leader in this space, and I think COVID probably drove them there to an extent, right?
Yes.
Another one that's been interesting to watch is financial services, and we've kind of had these different waves follow one another. So we had this huge cloud adoption wave, and then to your point, that drove everybody to get a lot of their data in place to be able to do that. And it was almost sort of a serendipitous moment that a lot of these Gen AI technologies just came on the heels of that. So when I think about financial services, which was one of the earliest cloud adoption waves, specifically in banking and insurance, they've now put a lot of the application of that technology against some of their biggest heart of the business issues. So you think about risk management and the credit card companies that have all of us swiping, however many times a day that are out there. So much fraud, so much detection of that is actually now done in an automated way using these technologies. You think about the wealth management industry and all of the different services that they're trying to bring to their customers, and the high degree of very expensive resources that used to be able to do that. A lot of that is starting to sort of come more to the fingertips in a very personalized way to the customers themselves without that having to be a high-touch environment. So it's neat to be able to see some of the leaders, but it's also neat to see how quickly everybody is now able to sort of catch up, again, in that more modular way. This isn't a monolithic 3-year journey to get to value. Sometimes it's months or even weeks to be able to implement and actually start to see those results.
I mean, it's competitive advantage.
100%.
It's like more so than we've ever seen. And right, speed is critical.
Yep.
I think that is the difference we've seen with this technology, is just how fast it's moving and how fast you need to move to keep up. And I think I kind of want to go back to a point you made earlier, Brian, where you mentioned the tech ecosystem.
Yep.
So I think one of the things that we're seeing is that a lot of leaders in our research do understand it's not just about having the generative AI capability or the large language model or whatever tools you're using. It's also about having other capabilities, whether it's having a good handle on cloud, or whether it's having a good handle on your data management. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about how important the tech ecosystem is to making a success out of this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've kind of seen a lot of organizations across industries adopt the ones that we all think of when we think of the term generative AI, right? It's the productivity suites, it's the large language models for sort of question answer chatbots, but what we found, and I mentioned a little bit earlier, is as organizations have gotten to the next wave of that, they've noticed it's a tremendous amount of work to build some of that, even for the smallest of use cases. So a lot of our clients and a lot of those that we've sort of talked to have said, how do we take advantage of the best of what's out there so that we can build upon it and sort of tweak for what we need versus having to build all of this from scratch? And you see, whether it's the hyperscalers, the ISV community, a lot of new companies too, and you think about the amount of venture capital that's gone into this space, creating a huge amount of sort of solutions that are solving end heart of the business problems, and that's financial services, it's healthcare, it's the tech space too. You think about all of the software development and all of the different sort of aids and accelerators there. You're now getting 300, 400, 500% the amount of efficiency out of a software developer than you did just 2 years ago, and the amount of sort of value that you can get out of that is almost limitless when you think about us still kind of scratching the surface on these types of things. So it's as much a build versus buy question now. And the nice thing is, back to your point on sort of that ERP wave, these aren't monolithic systems, so you can stitch them together. And as things innovate and as things change, you can continue to evolve as well in that more modular way, which just allows a lot more flexibility.
That's great. So I want to end on a fun one. Can you both share what you're most excited for coming out of this for 2025?
I mean, I'm happy to start. It's amazing to see how much has changed between last year and this year. We sort of talked about tech for tech last year to tech for outcome this year. I think what we expect to happen in 5 years, just a year ago, will probably happen in 1. So this floor will look pretty different next year, and the amount of proliferation and pace of change is just kind of fun to see year to year. So I'm excited to come back here next year and see what's changed.
Great. How about you, Lynn?
I'm really excited about all the pace that Brian had talked about, but also about the use of agents, right? The real use of agents. I mean, I can't wait to have my own personal agent do many things for me between, work and home, but the whole vision of autonomous finance, the vision of autonomous supply chain, that we actually could get there and we could actually use agents to not only we tell what to do, but then they actually execute on it, which is a very different place to be than where we've even ever envisioned before. So the real agentic AI coming out, which I know people are still a little skeptical of, I think it'll start small like it did, but then it'll start seeping into everything that we're doing. And so I'm excited for us to kind of start really seeing agents at work.
All right. Well, that's great. Well, thank you both for your time today, and thank you for tuning in.